Good evening, everyone. Sister Danger here. At the behest of one of my viewers, I was sent a list of female privileges from a blog called Men's Resistance. I didn't look very deeply into the blog, but it seems like it might be an MRM type of a blog. I'll put the link to it below and you guys can feel free to go through it at your leisure. I don't consider myself a feminist or a member of the MRM, so you might find this is a little bit of a mixed bag in this video, but I hope that even if that's the case, that it is still thought-provoking. After going over this list pretty much one by one, almost in its entirety, I took a big red mental marker to the vast majority and just wrote them off as being anything remotely like what I would describe as privilege. The first category that I kind of disqualified are things that seem to be descriptions of events. And then this has been extrapolated out as somehow being a privilege that is conferred upon all women by virtue of Vijaya, and they can all do this thing. Here are some quick examples. I may have the luxury of staying home and being a housewife, but if my sister's husband does the same thing, I'm likely to call him a deadbeat loser and tell her to leave him. If I succeed at keeping the female gym open and I leave late at night and I don't feel safe, I can demand that the university spend hundreds of thousands of dollars for more lighting and police presence. I can cry and get my husband to do something for me that he might not have done otherwise. None of these are things that I would even remotely classify as privileges. They are not something that all or even the majority of women can do by virtue of being a woman. They're just kind of these personal testimonies to various experiences that are then being called a gender privilege. Here are some examples of some items from the second category that I kind of mentally crossed off the list. If I go to a bar, I can expect that members of the opposite sex will purchase drinks for me. It is my right to maintain the belief that men oppress women despite all of the evidence to the contrary. If I meet a man that I like and I give him my phone number and he doesn't call, I have the right to think of him as an asshole. I have the option to be outraged if my husband asks me if my behavior is due to PMS, which is separate as a notion than the later use of PMS as a legal defense for murdering that same husband. I find these humorous, not necessarily in action, but humorous that they're being stated as a privilege, because I've got news for you folks. Opinions, beliefs, and expectations are something that absolutely everybody can have at any point in time, no matter who you are, and nobody can stop you. You can expect whatever the heck you want. You can get mad at somebody for whatever the heck you want, including PMS and not bringing you wine and chocolate or mowing the lawn on time. I mean, it's ridiculous to say that having an opinion is a privilege. It is literally an ability that you have that nobody can stop you from doing. So, again, unless you somehow have the electrodes hooked up and they prevent you from having thoughts, then these things are not privileges. So the next category is the patently absurd. These are just so silly that all I can do is find amusement in them. So I'm immune to cognitive dissonance. Yes, because that is somehow a privilege that applies only to women. Only women experience cognitive dissonance. No, I'm pretty sure that both men and women experience cognitive dissonance. And I don't think I would ever even remotely classify this thing as a privilege of any sort, because I don't know about you, but when I see somebody with just unabashed cognitive dissonance, I generally put that person in the not the brightest crayon in the box box. Like that guy or gal, not the coldest beer in the fridge. And I don't really consider idiocy to be an attractive or a privileged quality. If I'm white, I will live 6 years longer than the white males and 14 years longer than the black males. So an average of 10.
Well, it's the 10 worst years, isn't it, folks? It's the ones at the end. It's the wheelchair, adult diaper, kid into dialysis fucking years. You can have those years. We don't want them, all right?
7 times as much jewelry will be purchased by or for me than by or for men. I want this privilege. Where's this privilege? Please give me this privilege. Okay. My gender watches more television in every hour of every day than any other group. This, along with the fact that women control 80% of domestic spending, means that most television shows and advertisement are designed to appeal to me. Aww. So before I go on, I want to just reiterate that the very topic of privilege is, it really makes me wary anytime it gets trotted into a conversation. And that isn't because I don't believe that privilege exists. It's because I think that privilege, or the idea of privilege, has been absconded with by the social sciences and weaponized and used as a justification for taking things away from people. It is used as a way to silence conversation, and particularly conversation that may classify as criticism, questioning, or skepticism of any sort. And that is a practice that I very much do not agree with. There are many types of privileges, but the one that is usually kind of rolled out like a tax code that you have to pay up on is unearned privilege. And that is to say, advantages that you have through no merit of your own, but rather by happenstance of, some attribute of your person. I think we enter really dubious territory when we start labeling the aspects of people as being inherently privileged. And this doesn't reflect the real world very well. One might say that it is an alternative form of stereotyping, actually. The very same attributes which in one circumstance can be a boon, in a different setting can be a detriment of some sort. So when discussing privilege, I'm really very leery, and I don't mean that as a callback. I'm really very leery of categorizing intangible benefits as following from a person's attributes, such as their race, their gender, their sexual orientation alone. I prefer to try to tackle privilege from a quantitative approach as opposed to a qualitative approach, because the latter is so incredibly subjective and fluid. Okay, number 6. At any time I can abandon my parental responsibilities with little or no social stigma and hand the child over to the state or abort the pregnancy. A male could never relieve himself of this burden unless I allow him to. I'm not really going to speak to social stigma in all of this. Women, though, are ultimately allowed to divest themselves of their child if they choose to. I think that this is very disconcerting in our legal system, and one of the aspects of a kind of family and divorce law that really needs to be reassessed, and not just because of family laws, but actually also because of where this takes us when it comes to the adopting of children, the surrogacy of children, and everything that is involved there. This speaks to laws and policies that we may make concerning basically the bioethics of buying and selling various reproductive materials, so eggs and sperm and all these other things. How can we genetically alter things? Who owns zygotes? Who has a right to deal with the altering of those things? Consider, say, a lesbian or a gay couple. How do we look at the division of their roles as far as mother and father are concerned, and then where do the legal lines fall for that? These are really wide open, and it gives me cause for concern to think that we might be informing future laws with sort of this 1950s nuclear family idea, when that simply isn't reflective of the world we live in or the technology that we have increasingly at everyone's fingertips. I would like to see men and women equally valued and represented in the family, no matter what that family structure may be. If I commit a crime and am convicted, I will get a sentencing discount because of my gender. If I'm very pretty, it will increase my discount. Okay, I'm not really going to talk about the last part of this. It's pretty well established that people who are considered attractive by society receive all manner of different treatments across all kinds of fields. The sentencing discount, I also think, is a legitimate concern and is something that actually exists, that women do get lesser sentences. On a case-by-case basis, I am a little careful before coming to, a sort of rabid, angry conclusion about this, because I think that there can be a lot of different factors that may go into that. Ultimately, I do think that the justice system favors women. At age 18, I will not be forced to register for selective service and will not be penalized for failing to do so. Well, we all know that men have to register and women don't. Whether or not that is a privilege that women have, I think is really highly debatable, and it just isn't fair to either side to reduce it down to because women have babies and because men protect, and what other relative values for those two things. What I do think, though, is that the military, government, society, national security, all of these things are a very complex machinery. And rather than say that I don't think anybody should be forced to sign up for selective service, I actually think that everybody in the country should be required to do a minimum of 2 years of service to the country in some way, shape, or form. And of course, I think that that should take into account, what your abilities are, and not all men are cut out for combat. There are plenty of women out there that I'm sure could beat the pulp out of men, and I do question the wisdom of mixing up women in the military with men. I don't think we actually have any studies that show that the results of doing this produce a more powerful or better military unit. But I do think that women should be able to, if that's where their skills lie or their desire lies, they should be able to go into an all-female military unit and fight. I also think that men, just like women did perhaps back in the 50s or whatever, I think that men should be able to, if they really aren't cut out for combat, have other ways in which they can assist the country. When everybody has to participate in some way, everybody is invested. Whether or not it's a privilege that women don't have to sign up, I don't know. It's arguable. I know that I personally feel extremely grateful and thankful that I do not have to be the person that trots out there on the front line to be the first one to have bullets fired at me. Do I think that it should be changed regardless of that, though? Yes, I think that every citizen in our country should be required to be involved in our country for at least a little bit. If I make a false claim of rape, I'm not even going to read the rest of this, because I think that it is just blatantly obvious how profound an effect that a woman making claims of rape against a man for any reason can absolutely destroy his life, his career, his schooling, all of these things without even any due process or convictions, nothing. I don't have a good solution to this, but I definitely think that there is a disproportionate effect on men, and that women are absolutely able to use these types of sexual assault and abuse claims to their unmitigated advantage. It is one of the reasons that I believe so strongly in the presumption of innocence, and that I find the abuse of the justice system absolutely deplorable, because it undermines the very fabric of society. And that's not just your society or her society or his society, that's my society too. And for our system to have any kind of meaning and legitimacy in doing what it's supposed to be designed to do, it has to have integrity. Many of the repercussions that fall upon men when they are accused of these types of crimes have nothing to do with the justice system. Even if they are found innocent, they suffer a multitude of social backlash that it is just really exceedingly hard to quantify. So being someone that has a personal responsibility approach to life, I tend to think that the solution to this, to this issue begins with ourselves. It begins with us first not doing those things and having a very high sense of self-responsibility. Unfortunately, I think that is probably, something of an idealistic approach, and definitely not really representative of what's going on out there in the world, that this is something that is used and abused all the time. And the only people that seem to scream at the top of their lungs and try to convince society that nobody listens are basically your rabid feminists out there. I wish I had a solution for this. I oftentimes feel as though, as a woman, I am in a similar position to men that men seem to often find themselves in. They often seem to express that they feel like they are made out to be the bad guy when they're not the bad guy, that they are treated suspiciously as if every one of them is, a rapist waiting to happen. And by the same token, women get out there, make these frivolous claims, and the next thing you know, then all women are under this umbrella of being potentially crazy. You don't know if you say hello to a chick in a bar, if tomorrow morning you're going to wake up and suddenly have somebody knocking on your door trying to deliver a restraining order. So I don't really appreciate being under the umbrella of crazy chick, and I don't think that most men probably appreciate being under the umbrella of rapist or murderer waiting to happen. So I think it's really important that we self-police. We can't control the actions of other people, but we can definitely start by controlling our own. There are some other topics on the list that I really didn't go into or get a chance to cover. I didn't want this video to get too long. I think that women definitely benefit from a demonstrable greater proportion of money in mental and physical health care and social services. I would love to see a bolstering of resources out there for men. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in, and I hope you found some interesting kernels and food for thought in today's video. The night has passed into the day, so please feel free, as always, to leave comments in the low bar. And I know that this can be a really heated topic, so please try to have an extra care, to keep it polite. And everybody have a great Friday. I will see you all on the flip side.